We often hear about spiritual transformation, but what does it actually look like from the inside? I'm not talking about the polished, Instagram perfect version. I mean the messy, the human, the deeply personal reality of it all. Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, through this really remarkable collection of private writings that document one person's raw, unfiltered journey. So this is how the book opens, and right away, it sets the tone. This isn't some public lecture, it's an intimate document. It's like finding a diary. It gives us this incredible window into the middle years of a spiritual practitioner's path, a time of intense struggle, total desperation, and ultimately, surrender.
So who is this author, Yogani? Well, he's very clear that he's not some kind of remote guru living on a mountaintop. His life, surprisingly ordinary. Born in New York, grew up in New Jersey, got married, raised 3 kids down in Florida, and had a whole career. This story doesn't come from a monastery, it comes straight from the suburbs.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because you have these two sides of his life just colliding. On one hand, he's a busy family man, a career person, dealing with all the stuff we all deal with. But on the other hand, he's this deeply committed spiritual practitioner. This book, it captures the exact moment when those two worlds just couldn't coexist peacefully anymore.
So let's put this on a timeline. He starts meditating back in the 70s, but it's the 80s that become what he calls a messy time. And these writings, they come from that exact period, a critical crisis point about 15 years into his practice that would end up defining everything that came next.
Okay, so what was the struggle really all about? In a really candid letter from 1988, which he includes in the book, Yogani just lays it all out, this flawed philosophy that was driving him right to a breaking point. And it's something I think a lot of us might recognize in ourselves.
I mean, the honesty here is just stunning. He straight up admits his strategy was to use his spiritual practice to get ahead in his career. He was trying to get the divine to serve his ego's ambition, a strategy he later just calls truly nonsense. He was basically praying for spiritual juice to make his business succeed.
And get this wasn't just some phase he went through. He points out that this ego-driven approach hung on for nearly 15 years, even with dedicated daily meditation. It's a pretty powerful reminder of just how deep these patterns can run, and that the spiritual path is definitely not always a straight line up.
And these were the specific things causing all the friction inside. The classic worldly desires, wanting to be known, wanting more money, more influence. He writes that he was truly on the razor's edge because he knew these fixations could lead to a huge spiritual fall at any second.
But, a strategy that's all about the ego serving itself, it's a house of cards. It was just bound to fail. This internal conflict couldn't go on forever, and when it finally broke, the collapse was dramatic. But it was also ultimately transformative.
It's a really crucial question, isn't it? When the life that we've built on pure ambition and trying to control everything starts to fall apart, what happens then? For Yogini's failure wasn't just about his career. It was a huge spiritual crossroads that forced him to question the very foundation of his life.
And then, it happened. In the real world, the business he'd been trying so hard to prop up with all this spiritual ambition, it just completely failed. And that collapse shattered his whole philosophy. It brought him to his knees. The ego's game was officially over.
This was his state of mind, total desperation. And it was right out of this rock-bottom moment that the prayers and poems were born. They weren't written for anyone else. They were just cries from the heart, a raw conversation with the divine.
And that is the real power of these writings. They're not polished little works of art. No, they are the record of the messy, emotional, real-time process of letting go of the ego's death grip and just surrendering to something bigger. You can literally watch the transformation happen right there on the page.
The whole thing starts with this raw cry of desperation. All the pretense is just gone. The spiritual ego is shattered, and all that's left is this complete, total admission of need. The worldly strategy failed, and this is what's left, a desperate desire for something real.
And as the process goes on, that raw desperation starts to change. It transforms into this deep devotional longing. The focus shifts from what the ego wants to this painful, heartfelt ache for union with the divine. It's a total flip in direction from demanding to just yearning.
And then comes the release. After the desperation and the longing, there's this incredible sense of relief. He talks about hearing the laughter of the sages and realizing that the ego's life or death struggle was, in the grand scheme of things, kind of a silly joke. And that's the freedom. That's what comes from finally surrendering.
So you might be thinking, okay,
This is a super personal story. Why does it matter to anyone else? Well, because this period of hitting rock bottom and surrendering everything, that wasn't the end of the story. It was the necessary step that built the foundation for all of his future public teachings.
And the connection is just so clear. You can draw a straight line. The wisdom that poured out into thousands of lessons and over a dozen books for the public, it came directly from this turning point. The private breakdown was absolutely essential for the public breakthrough. He had to dissolve his own ego before he could teach anyone else how to navigate theirs.
So after that entire incredible journey, after looking for support everywhere outside himself and failing, he arrived at this one simple truth. The ultimate source of wisdom, of guidance, it was, and it always is, right inside you.
This whole journey really leaves us with a powerful question to reflect on. In our own lives, whether it's our career, our relationships, or heck, even on our spiritual path, where might we be running an ego-based strategy? Trying to make life serve us instead of surrendering to its flow. It's definitely a thought worth sitting with.